Gen Z is often called the digital generation, but behind the memes and viral trends lies a far more complex reality. From social media pressure to climate anxiety, their struggles aren't just cultural, they're wired into the brain. Here are 8 challenges shaping Gen Z today, explained through neuroscience and psychology, with insights for navigating them. Mental health struggles. Gen Z is experiencing anxiety, depression, and burnout at rates that outpace older generations. And it's not just about stressful times. Neuroscience shows that their brains are under chronic strain. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, stays in overdrive, scanning for threats and amplifying worry. On top of that, many Gen Zers get less sleep than their brains require, which disrupts the production of serotonin and dopamine, the chemicals that stabilize mood and create motivation. Add fewer face-to-face connections, which normally provide oxytocin and emotional regulation, and the result is a cycle of worry, fatigue, and emotional exhaustion that's tough to escape. This isn't about weakness or lack of resilience. It's the reality of a brain wired for survival being pushed to its limits in an always-on, high-pressure world. The mental load of juggling school, career, economic uncertainty, and online pressures keeps the nervous system constantly activated, leaving little room for recovery. For Gen Z, the path forward starts with treating sleep, movement, and real-life connection as brain essentials, not optional extras. And for parents, teachers, or employers, the most helpful response isn't criticism but compassion, recognizing that this generation is carrying neurological and emotional weights heavier than most people realize. Social media pressure. Social media isn't just something fun to do. It literally hijacks the brain's reward system. Every like, view, or comment delivers a dopamine hit, the same chemical tied to pleasure and motivation. At first, this feels good, but the brain quickly adapts, needing bigger or more frequent hits to feel the same reward. That's why scrolling can start as entertainment and end in exhaustion, leaving moods emptier and anxiety higher. It's not just a bad habit. It's a rewiring of reward pathways designed to keep people hooked. For Gen Z, the challenge is learning to treat social media more like dessert than the main meal. Enjoyable in moderation, but harmful when it becomes the default fuel for self-worth. Real dopamine balance comes from offline activities, exercise, hobbies, face-to-face connections that give the brain deeper and more sustainable rewards. And for parents, teachers, and peers, the solution isn't shaming or banning phones, but creating environments where offline connection feels just as rewarding as digital validation. When in-person spaces feel safe, engaging, and meaningful, social media becomes a supplement rather than a substitute. Economic uncertainty. For Gen Z, money stress isn't just a background worry. It's a constant mental weight that shapes how the brain works day to day. Neuroscience shows that financial insecurity activates the brain's survival systems, keeping stress hormones elevated and pulling energy away from the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for long-term planning, focus, and decision-making. When the brain is locked in survival mode, it struggles to think beyond the short term. That's why procrastination, burnout, or the feeling of being stuck are so common. They're not personal failures, but symptoms of a brain conserving energy under chronic pressure. This generation is coming of age during housing crises, student debt burdens, unstable job markets, and inflation. The constant uncertainty leaves their nervous systems running hot, with little room for the sense of stability needed to dream big. The most effective strategy isn't to chase unrealistic timelines or compare yourself to overnight success stories, but to break big goals into smaller, manageable steps. Micro wins give the prefrontal cortex something to build on and gradually restore a sense of control. For older generations watching Gen Z navigate this storm, support looks less like saying, just work harder, and more like offering mentorship, financial tools, and empathy. Climate anxiety. Gen Z has grown up in a world where talk of rising seas, wildfires, and collapsing ecosystems isn't background noise, it's part of everyday life. Neuroscience helps explain why this hits so hard. When the brain's default mode network, the system that thinks about the self in the future, gets overloaded with catastrophic scenarios, it creates what's known as anticipatory anxiety. Instead of imagining opportunities, the brain rehearses worst-case outcomes, which fuels sleepless nights, difficulty focusing, and a lack of motivation. It's not just worrying too much, it's a neurological loop that convinces the body to stay on alert even when danger isn't immediate. For young people trying to build their lives, this makes the future feel heavy before it even arrives. The weight of fixing the planet adds to existing pressures around school, careers, and relationships. Breaking that loop starts small, channeling fear into meaningful action, whether it's joining a climate group, making sustainable lifestyle changes, or focusing on local impact. Action rewires the brain toward empowerment instead of helplessness. For parents, teachers, and leaders, the most powerful support is validation, treating climate anxiety as a rational response and encouraging Gen Z to transform concern into constructive energy rather than dismissing it as overreacting. Loneliness despite connection. On paper, Gen Z should be the least lonely generation in history. With constant access to texting, group chats, FaceTime, and social media, they're connected around the clock. But neuroscience shows why that connection often feels hollow. The brain is wired to bond through eye contact, tone of voice, body language, and even small physical cues like a handshake or hug. These moments release oxytocin, the hormone that strengthens trust and social closeness. Digital interactions, while convenient, don't fully trigger those systems. That's why someone can have hundreds of online friends yet still feel socially starved. This mismatch leaves many young people caught in a paradox, always talking, rarely feeling truly heard. It also explains why loneliness is so prevalent among Gen Z, despite their digital ties. The solution isn't abandoning technology, it's making sure real-world interactions remain a priority. Meeting a friend in person, joining clubs or groups, or even choosing a phone call over a text nourishes the brain in ways digital messages can't. For parents, educators, and peers, the best support is creating safe, inclusive environments where face-to-face interaction is encouraged. A welcoming coffee shop, a team project, or even a family dinner can give the brain the social nutrients it's craving. Identity overload. Gen Z is navigating identity in a world of endless options. Career paths, belief systems, lifestyles, and online personas, all presented at once. The brain's prefrontal cortex, which helps shape self-understanding, doesn't fully mature until the mid-20s. During that stage, it's still piecing together values, preferences, and long-term goals. But with social media offering millions of comparisons, the system gets overloaded. Instead of forming a stable sense of self, the brain bounces between influences, leading to confusion, indecision, and anxiety about who am I really? This isn't immaturity, it's a neurological reality. Too much choice can paralyze the brain, making decisions feel risky and exhausting. Many Gen Zers feel pressured to figure out their identity early, but the truth is that identity is supposed to be a process, not a deadline. The healthiest path forward is focusing less on external labels and more on core values and lived experiences, which provide stable anchors as the brain develops. For parents, teachers, and employers, the most supportive role isn't to push for quick answers, but to give young people room to explore. With patience, the prefrontal cortex does its work, and identity naturally solidifies with time and experience. Information overload. Gen Z lives in the noisiest information environment in human history. News alerts, TikTok feeds, group chats, and endless notifications flood the brain's working memory, the mental desk that holds information temporarily for decision-making. The problem is that this desk has limited space. When it's constantly cluttered, executive functions like planning, focus, and self-control start to break down. That's why many young people feel scatterbrained, struggle to prioritize, or find it exhausting to concentrate on a single task. It isn't because Gen Z is less capable. It's because their brains are being asked to process more inputs than they were designed for. This constant overload also keeps the nervous system on low-level alert, adding to stress and fatigue. The brain ends up spending energy on filtering instead of thinking deeply, which explains why doom scrolling leaves people drained but not informed. The solution isn't going completely offline, but protecting mental bandwidth. Turning off non-essential notifications, carving out focus windows, or even practicing digital detox days gives the brain breathing space to reset. For teachers, managers, and parents, the best way to help isn't to complain about short attention spans. It's to create environments with fewer distractions, where focus feels possible again. Crisis fatigue. Gen Z has grown up with a near-constant stream of global emergencies. Pandemics, mass shootings, political unrest, climate disasters, and economic instability. Neuroscience explains why this feels so draining. The brain's HPA axis, which controls the stress response, isn't designed to stay on all the time. Continuous exposure to bad news floods the body with cortisol, the stress hormone. Over time, this not only impairs mood, memory, and concentration, but also suppresses the immune system. Eventually, the brain tries to protect itself by going numb, which shows up as emotional exhaustion, cynicism, or the sense that nothing matters. That's crisis fatigue. Lately, even the so-called Gen Z stare has gone viral online, a blank, unamused expression that people laugh at, but few truly understand. The truth is, it's not just a look, it's a symptom. Behind the flat gaze is a brain in overdrive, trying to survive a world that never turns off. For many, this fatigue creates a push-pull dynamic. They care deeply about issues, but constant exposure leaves them too overwhelmed to act. It's not apathy, it's survival. The first step out of that cycle is learning to curate what goes into the brain. Fewer doom-scroll spirals, more intentional moments of action and control. And for parents, teachers, and leaders, the message matters. Pair truth about crises with hope, so young people can see a future worth showing up for. Gen Z's struggles aren't weaknesses. They reflect how the brain is adapting to nonstop stress, uncertainty, and digital overload. The truth is, society wasn't prepared to properly take care of this generation in the middle of such rapid tech development. But understanding the brain behind the struggle helps shift us from blame to solutions. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and add your own experiences in the comments. Together, we can build stronger minds and a stronger future. Better Brain Days.